Most people agree that there is a need for surveillance and intelligence gathering. Yet when that surveillance is used against us, we begin to critique the very idea we once supported. We believe that we have nothing to hide, and therefore the government should have no reason to study our every action and decision. It is this mentality which has been owned over the past few decades that has led to our own self-deprecation. How many of you, if I asked, would give me your passwords to your email or phone? None of you. The reason is because we all have something to hide, whether we are a terrorist cell hiding bomb designs or a simple teenager hiding embarrassing photos. We all say at some point that we have nothing to hide, yet our actions negate the authenticity of our belief. In essence, this is what intelligence gathering truly is. It is the collection and analysis of information on any form of entity. Nowhere in that statement is it listed that good people are excluded, which is why it is so perplexing to see the drastic changes in human behavior when they realize they are not alone. Hello everyone, my name is Shyam OW, and during my second year in the ISM program, I am pursuing an independent study in strategic intelligence. During the course of my research, and you guys all may be wondering why I'm comparing us to a terrorist group, because clearly there are a bunch of differences, is because these two people, Chelsea Manning now, as you underwent a sex change, and Edward Snowden. These two guys are the faces of the intelligence community right now due to their leaking of private information to the public. On the left is Chelsea Manning, and what she did was that she released files on particular assets around the world and got many people in China, Malaysia, India, Europe, and Australia killed because they were undercover. And Edward Snowden on the right released CIA strategic files and their intelligence gathering techniques, which was highly classified information. And both of these people revealed to me the importance of threat analysis, which is why the government does monitor its citizens and bad people or terrorist groups, and the importance of red and blue team assessments, where you have two teams that are going up against each other to exploit each other's weaknesses. Over the course of my interviews, my first interview, I came across Jason Strain, who is an FBI special agent, and he spoke to me more about the counterterrorism unit and how they take action only after a terrorist event has occurred, and he is also a heavy undercover operative, so he wasn't able to share much with me, but what he was able to get across was that life does get lonely. And the last thing we did was a very cool analytical test where we were at a Starbucks and he made me analyze the people around me, and it took me a while to get it, but he was able to do it much faster, so that's what I found really interesting about him. My next interview was with Jennifer Baker, who is a counterintelligence officer, and she works with the FBI's Industrial Espionage Unit, where they investigate companies, and they investigate the kind of espionage acts that are done with companies. She told me that she has a high classified national security clearance, and her training went through Quantico, which I learned that when you go through Quantico, you do not get to pick the field you get into. It gets picked for you based on your skill development and who you are and what position you placed in your class. My next interview was with Brian Tima, and it was a back-to-back interview with Jennifer Baker and Brian Tima, and he's a counterintelligence operative, so he's actually in the field and he does field work, and he works with FBI's Economic Espionage Unit, and what he does is he goes undercover into shell corporations or other sorts of companies that illegally fund terrorism or try to bankrupt economies, and he tries to exploit them using public domains. He talked to me a little bit about high security targets and the importance of conducting a threat analysis on these people, because those high security targets may have connections to people who are deep undercover or have have assets that may not be on the FBI radar, so if we exploit those high security targets, then you will find the connections. He also talked about protecting trade secrets, and that's a huge part of FBI's Economic Espionage Unit, as they protect America's trade secrets and corporations' trade secrets, because if those were to get out, you are looking at mass lawsuits. He also talked to me about how the FBI is on a need-to-know basis, and working with counterintelligence, that specific division has a higher level of clearance, which even the people in the FBI office don't know what they do. My fourth interview was with Wilbur Gregory, and he is a retired FBI agent in the White Collar and Drug Regulation Division. He has over 25 years of field work, and what he did was not only did he catch bank robberies or stop drug regulation, he worked a little bit in the counterterrorism unit, and he talked to me about why I should consider not going into the FBI, and he said Our world is becoming more increasingly global, therefore you shouldn't look at a domestic unit versus an international unit, which is why he said the CIA might be better. But the one thing he stressed the most was to get out of whatever agency I do quickly. And this is something that has been stressed by multiple of my interviews, and they say that if you stay too long in the FBI, it takes a toll on your life, and that was visible to me due to his raspy voice and his, almost like his presence was demeaning. My fifth interview was with John Ritchie, and he is a former CIA intelligence officer, and what he was he was a case officer, so he was in charge of building assets, building relationships to gather the information for our government. And a couple of years ago, or 10 years ago, he moved from the public to the private sector, where he worked in risk management and advising, and his company right now is GDI Risk, which is a strategic intelligence firm that consults with companies overseas, but at the same time they are running background checks on these companies. He has spent a lifetime in this intelligence community, and he says that he wouldn't trade it for the world. The highlights of my interview was that failure is not tolerable in this field. This field is a need-to-know basis, and you have to have a multifaceted skill set, but also thinking about the bigger picture. You must be versatile and open to suggestion, while also being able to work independently and work alone, as this is a lonely field. So my mentorship is with John Ritchie, who is the CEO of GDI Risk Advisory Group, the advisor to the board of the Patriot Defense Group, as well as the new CEO of Vocal Media, which is now taking over part of this old CBS radio station. My plan intentionally was to work with his team, but that changed over time as now I learn more about the history of the CIA and other intelligence groups, and he teaches me the skills and the ideas that I need to grasp in order to become a CIA operative in the future. And what he has me do is he has me research on history, like different sorts of acts of espionage, different sorts of intelligence gathering, terrorist events, and he has me read and research into it deeply before getting back to him on a presentation. Some of the obstacles I've had to overcome with this mentorship is that there's a confidentiality and high level of security, and this part of the mentorship is very hard for me to convey, especially due to my mentor visit assessments, where I will not be able to tell everything that I am doing. But overall, my experiences where I learned the fundamental skills and I get to collaborate with this team overseas somewhat has given me insight on the private sector. For my original work, I had a 3-step process where I was researching the 2 or 3 case files, and what I researched into was Stasi, the KGB, the CIA, and MI5, all of the 4 greatest intelligence services back in the 1900s. And what I did was I tried to find a common strategy implemented by all of these agencies when they are working undercover, when they're trying to gather intelligence. And what I did with that was I analyzed the inefficiencies to develop a new plan. The skills being tested were analytical, strategic thinking, my attention to detail, and my organization and planning. And one thing that was common among all these clandestine services was that they used this thing called the intelligence cycle, where I spot a target or define a target, then I assess them based on their location, their access, and their vulnerabilities. Then I build a relationship with them, whether it takes 6 months to a couple of years. Then I disseminate, which is completely destroy and leave no trace behind. This is my actual original work, and so the first part and the main component of it was researching into the strategy, but the second part was analyzing Deloitte's corporate espionage, an intelligence collection of Bearing Point, a former competitor 10 years ago. A little bit of background on Bearing Point and Deloitte was that Deloitte is a huge consulting firm now in the North American region. But before then, there was a company here known as Bearing Point, originally started back in the Netherlands. This company was the biggest consulting firm in the North American region, but they had federal assets and the government funding that Deloitte wanted back then. And what Deloitte did was that they sent in a team of undercover accountants and CIA operatives alike into Bearing Point as employees and gathered information on their financials as Bearing Point was about to file for bankruptcy. However, what happened in the end was that Deloitte bought Bearing Point for $200 million less than what they should have spent, and the only way they could have done that was by committing a corporate espionage. The purpose of this espionage was for Deloitte to gain access to the federal assets and the government funding that was originally given to Bearing Point. Now, these assets have what made Deloitte a monopoly here in the North American region as one of the greatest consulting firms ever built. Now, I already talked about Deloitte's strategy, but where Bearing Point made a mistake in this files was that Bearing Point was under a lot of stress due to this huge merge about to occur with Deloitte, which they were aware of. However, they did not know that Deloitte's employees were undercover within their company. So when they were called into an emergency meeting, they left all of their files on a public domain in the area where they were meeting, leaving it accessible to the CIA agents to pick up and give it to the accountants to analyze and send back to Deloitte. Now, the strategies used were great by Deloitte. However, they could have avoided a lot of trouble and a lot of public discrimination and public denunciation by using this strategy that I created, where you do have two teams. You have an alpha and a beta team, and each team has only one CIA operative and 4 accountants, and those 4 accountants serve the purpose of having a senior accountant and 3 minor accountants. And the reason why the senior accountant is there is to make sure that these minor accountants are doing their job correctly, and the CIA's job is to get access to the senior executives, become friends with them, get that relationship built, which is that part of assessing in the intelligence cycle. And that way, when you have that kind of access to the senior executives, you are able to utilize their resources, utilize their knowledge, and take that into consideration when you're sending your stuff back to Deloitte. And this strategy was using the intelligence cycle, but one thing I stressed was not to use human intelligence. You cannot always trust human intelligence because people will say whatever they want to say when they're in a vulnerable position. So that way you would have to use a cyber threat. The final stages of my strategy was the dissemination process, and this is where the CIA completely cleans out all their work that they've done at Bearing Point, gather the intelligence that they needed, and leave their job and go back to Deloitte, where they could successfully complete the vertical merger. Now, to you guys, it might seem like this espionage was committed and it's wrong, but Deloitte, according to the press, did follow the statutes of corporate espionage, and there are 3 parts to that. The statutes of corporate espionage say, did the victim, in this instance Bearing Point, attempt to safeguard their files? And the answer is yes, they did. Before the senior executive meeting, all their files were on a secure network, a private network within the company, as well as in a vault of with paper copies. The second statute of corporate espionage is that did the oppressor obtain all the information via a public open domain? And the open domain was that meeting place where the CIA was infiltrated in there, and they gained all that information because the papers were all left behind, supposedly according to the press. And the third statute of corporate espionage was theft committed, and theft is based off of the first 2. And so, because it was obtained via public domain, and there was an attempt to safeguard, it was not theft. My original work pioneered the way for my understanding of the different levels of strategic intelligence and how they correlate. In my research, I did come across a commonality among all the greatest clandestine services and their operatives, who mirrored Charles Darwin's word. It is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but rather the ones who are most responsive to change. Heading into the final chapter of my ISM journey, bearing those words in mind shall be crucial, as my mentor promised me that my mentor visits will become more intuitively challenging, and that my final product, whatever we both decide to create, shall test my ability to adapt under dire circumstances. Strategic intelligence on an economic, commercial, and national level is a field in which actions become a center of controversy. As long as we understand that intelligence gathering exists because human perspective continues to create conflicts, then the need for this essential field is unwavering. Thank you.